there has been so much resistance to me having you on the show. I've even, not just white people, I've had black people tell me, what you need to do is get sick on Wednesday. True story. Get sick on Wednesday and cancel Thursday, Friday.
I'm not exactly sure why booking him caused people to deal with me any differently than Barbara Walters or anybody else that interviewed him. Right. Even if you think I suck as an interviewer, I have the right to talk.
They warned him, if you air that interview, we'll destroy your career. But Arsenio Hall did it anyway. What happened next became the most explosive moment in late-night TV history. Arsenio Hall once revealed that a single guest appearance effectively ended his legendary late-night run, an event that would forever change how America viewed both entertainment and controversy. The now infamous interview on February 25, 1994, featuring Minister Louis Farrakhan, became one of the most explosive hours in television history. But the story wasn't just about a single night or a single conversation. It was about what that night represented: the collision of race, media, and power in an America still deeply uncomfortable with who got to hold the microphone. The real conflict, as Arsenio later explained, had begun long before the cameras rolled. It was the culmination of months, even years, of tension brewing behind closed doors, where television executives, sponsors, and social critics wrestled with a question that has haunted media ever since: who gets to tell their truth on national television? For Arsenio Hall, that question had always been at the center of his career. When the Arsenio Hall Show first hit the airwaves in 1989, it was more than a late-night talk show, it was a revolution. Hall, a charismatic comedian with a natural sense of rhythm and empathy, created a space where black culture could exist on its own terms. His show didn't just break the mold of late-night television, it shattered it completely. At a time when Johnny Carson and David Letterman ruled the format with buttoned-up humor and largely white guests, Arsenio walked onto the stage with a different kind of energy: confident, soulful, and unapologetically urban. His studio wasn't just a set, it was a celebration. The famous woof, woof chants from his audience became more than a sound effect. They were a rallying cry for representation, a moment of cultural affirmation that said, "We are here, and we belong." The show quickly became the heartbeat of young Black America. For millions of viewers, the Arsenio Hall Show wasn't just entertainment, it was validation. Hip-hop artists who had never been invited to mainstream platforms found themselves performing for millions. Groups like Public Enemy, NWA, and a young Tupac Shakur made their national television debuts on Arsenio's stage. These weren't sanitized appearances meant to make white audiences comfortable. They were real, raw, and powerful. When Magic Johnson spoke publicly about his HIV diagnosis, it was Arsenio's stage he chose. When Michael Jackson wanted to make a special appearance, he called Arsenio. Even Eddie Murphy, one of the biggest stars of the time and a close friend of Hall, made multiple visits, using the platform to connect directly with fans rather than filtered press interviews. But the show wasn't just about celebrities. It was about politics and social awareness too. When Bill Clinton appeared in 1992, saxophone in hand, playing Heartbreak Hotel with the band, it wasn't just a gimmick. It was a cultural moment that changed the trajectory of his campaign. That performance humanized Clinton to younger voters and Black audiences in ways no traditional political appearance could have. For the first time, late-night television wasn't just entertainment, it was political strategy, social commentary, and cultural empowerment rolled into one. Arsenio Hall had made it cool to be politically aware, culturally proud, and unafraid to speak truth to power, all while making people laugh. Yet, success in America, especially for a Black host commanding mainstream attention, often comes with an expiration date. By late 1993, the pressures were mounting, competitors were circling, advertisers were cautious, and executives were beginning to wonder whether the Arsenio phenomenon had reached its limit. Beneath the surface of his confident on-air persona, Hall was juggling growing creative frustrations and the weight of being one of the few Black men at the helm of a nationally syndicated show. Behind every cheer from his audience was a corporate boardroom deciding how long that celebration could last before it became too risky to sustain. Then came the announcement, February 7, 1994, that Minister Louis Farrakhan would appear on the Arsenio Hall Show. Within hours, the reaction was explosive. The booking sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry, sparking immediate outrage from Jewish organizations, advertisers, and media watchdogs. Some accused Hall of legitimizing hatred, others accused him of betraying his audience. But for many within the Black community, the decision was seen as bold, even courageous. Farrakhan, leader of the Nation of Islam, had long been both revered and reviled. To some, he was a voice of black empowerment, speaking uncomfortable truths about systemic racism. To others, he was a dangerous figure, accused of anti-Semitism and divisive rhetoric. Hall, however, wasn't interested in labels. He was interested in conversation. As he later explained, his goal was not to endorse Farrakhan's views but to offer a rare opportunity for open dialogue, something he believed was essential in a democracy. But network executives and advertisers didn't see it that way. To them, the decision looked like career suicide. Within days, sponsors began pulling back, affiliates threatened to drop the episode, and industry insiders whispered that Arsenio had gone too far. What should have been a moment of journalistic integrity, a black host giving a controversial black leader a fair, unfiltered platform, was instead treated as an act of defiance that needed to be punished. The controversy that followed was unlike anything late-night television had ever seen. On February 25, 1994, when the interview finally aired, millions tuned in. For nearly an hour, Farrakhan discussed everything from the assassination of Malcolm X to the role of the media in shaping racial narratives. He defended his record, challenged accusations of hate speech, and argued that his words had been taken out of context by a press more interested in scandal than truth. When Arsenio confronted him directly about the Black Hitler comparison, a phrase that had haunted Farrakhan in the press, the minister's response was calm but firm. "I have never wanted to harm another human being. I have never taught that Jews should be exterminated for their faith." His statement, both defensive and philosophical, underscored the deep divisions in how America processed his image. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. Critics across major newspapers lambasted Arsenio for what they called a softball interview. The Los Angeles Times and Chicago Tribune accused him of being uncritical, unprepared, even worshipful. The implication was clear. A black entertainer had overstepped his bounds. Meanwhile, white journalists such as Barbara Walters, who interviewed Farrakhan just 2 months later for 2020's, faced no such professional blowback. The double standard was glaring and painful. As Hall later reflected, "I wasn't treated like Barbara Walters. I wasn't treated like anyone else who talked to him. Even if you think I'm a bad interviewer, I have the right to talk." Behind the headlines, however, the narrative was even more complex. Years later, Arsenio revealed that he had already submitted his resignation letter to Paramount executives months before the Farrakhan interview even took place. His decision to leave had nothing to do with the controversy. The show's decline had been set in motion by shifting market forces, new late-night competitors, changing viewer habits, and the consolidation of media ownership that made independent programming harder to sustain. The Farrakhan episode merely provided a convenient scapegoat for a decision that had already been made in the boardroom. Still, the symbolic impact of that interview couldn't be denied. It became a cultural flashpoint, a mirror reflecting America's discomfort with unmediated black voices on national television. By giving Farrakhan a platform, Arsenio had crossed an invisible boundary that many in power preferred to keep intact. The line separating entertainment from unfiltered black consciousness. The industry called it controversy. History might call it courage. As the months passed, the consequences became impossible to ignore. Advertisers pulled their support. Some affiliates refused to air episodes, and network pressure mounted. The show's energy dimmed under the weight of scrutiny. Yet, through it all, Arsenio kept showing up. Sharp suit, dazzling smile, microphone in hand, determined to finish strong. When the Arsenio Hall show aired its final episode on May 27, 1994, it wasn't just the end of a television program, it was the end of an era. Looking back, it's clear that Arsenio Hall's story was never just about celebrity gossip or talk show politics. It was about visibility, about who gets to exist in public without apology. His show brought together music, politics, humor, and raw humanity in a way no other late-night program ever had. It gave a voice to the voiceless and a platform to the marginalized. But in an industry that profits from black culture while often punishing black expression, that kind of authenticity was always risky. In the years since, Arsenio has spoken candidly about those final days, about how exhaustion, industry politics and cultural backlash converged to end a groundbreaking run. Yet even in its closure, the Arsenio Hall show left an indelible mark. It changed how television approached youth, race, and relevance. It showed that hip-hop could share a stage with politics, that laughter could coexist with activism, and that a black host could command America's attention without compromising his identity.
We're shocked at the attention that it got on the day the booking was announced. But we knew our audience. We knew people were interested in him and the coming Million Man March that I had heard him.
The Farrakhan controversy might have been the spark that ignited the end, but it wasn't the cause. It was merely the moment when America's unspoken anxieties about race, religion, and free speech boiled over into plain view. For Arsenio Hall, it was a painful reminder that when you challenge the system from within, the system often finds a way to close the door. Yet, in doing so, he became something larger than a talk show host. He became a symbol of what happens when truth and entertainment collide, and when courage refuses to bow to fear. In hindsight, that single guest appearance didn't destroy the Arsenio Hall show, it immortalized it. When news broke that Minister Louis Farrakhan would appear on the Arsenio Hall show, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Hall later admitted that while he and his team expected attention, they were stunned by the intensity of the backlash. They knew their audience was curious, especially with Farrakhan speaking about the upcoming Million Man March, but the criticism poured in from every direction before the interview even aired. Jewish organizations, media watchdogs, and even members of Arsenio's own staff questioned whether it was responsible to give Farrakhan a national platform, fearing his controversial remarks could inflame racial and religious tensions. The Simon Wiesenthal Center went as far as demanding that the booking be canceled, citing Farrakhan's comments comparing the Holocaust to the oppression of Black Americans. For Mara Kale Brown, Arsenio's Jewish producing partner, the uproar created an especially difficult situation, forcing her to navigate both professional loyalty and personal conviction. Behind the scenes, what had once been hailed as a triumph of Black representation was now being torn apart by the very divisions it sought to bridge. As the air date approached, pressure on Hall escalated. Some network affiliates threatened not to broadcast the episode, and advertisers expressed fears of backlash by association. Friends and colleagues even urged him to feign illness to avoid the controversy altogether. Yet, despite the uproar, Arsenio refused to back down. He viewed the interview not as an endorsement, but as a matter of journalistic integrity, a chance for viewers to hear Farrakhan's perspective directly, without the distortions of second-hand reporting. That choice, bold and principled as it was, would ultimately define his career and mark the beginning of its end.
We talked about this show before all of this controversy arose. I told you then, and I tell you now, ask me anything that is in the hearts and minds of your listeners, white or Black, Jewish or Gentile. And if I cannot answer those questions with truth, then I have no business being.
The February 25, 1994, interview between Arsenio Hall and Minister Louis Farrakhan became one of the most contentious moments in television history, an hour that would not only ignite national outrage, but also mark the beginning of the end for the Arsenio Hall show. The wide-ranging discussion tackled everything from the assassination of Malcolm X to accusations of anti-Semitism, with Farrakhan using the opportunity to speak directly to viewers without the filter of mainstream media. Arsenio opened the show by acknowledging the controversy surrounding the booking, admitting that he had faced pressure from both Black and white critics to cancel the appearance. That opening set the tone for a broadcast that was as much about free expression as it was about race, religion, and power. When Arsenio asked the difficult question, "Who killed Malcolm X?" Farrakhan addressed the long-standing rumors about his alleged involvement, which had resurfaced after Spike Lee's 1992 film, Malcolm X. His response delved into the internal divisions within the Nation of Islam, the media's manipulation of Black leaders, and how these narratives were used to weaken Black political unity. The interview reached its most explosive moment when Hall confronted Farrakhan with the Black Hitler label that had defined his public image. Farrakhan passionately denied ever promoting hatred, declaring, "I have never wanted to harm another human being. I have never taught that Jews should be exterminated for their faith." He argued that such comparisons were designed to discredit strong Black leadership and distract from his mission to empower Black communities through education, economics, and spiritual growth. Despite this, critics swiftly condemned both men. Commentators accused Arsenio of going too easy on Farrakhan, calling it a softball interview that allowed dangerous views to go unchallenged. Newspapers like the Los Angeles Times and the Chicago Tribune published scathing reviews, calling Hall a failed journalist who had destroyed himself by showing too much reverence for his guest. What many failed to acknowledge was the racial double standard at play. White journalists such as Barbara Walters and Ed Gordon interviewed Farrakhan soon after without facing comparable backlash or career damage. The difference was clear. A black host offering an unfiltered platform to a controversial black leader posed a far greater threat to the establishment than any interview conducted under white. Institutional control. The fallout was brutal. Advertisers withdrew. Affiliates expressed concern, and industry insiders quietly pushed Hall toward the exit. The interview that was meant to spark conversation instead became a flashpoint for how America polices who gets to speak and who pays the price for letting them. When the Arsenio Hall show aired its February 25, 1994 interview with Minister Louis Farrakhan, the fallout was immediate and several television affiliates refused to broadcast the episode or aired it with disclaimers warning viewers of controversial content. Advertisers began backing away under pressure from organized campaigns, revealing how economic leverage, not just public opinion, could be weaponized to silence voices deemed too provocative for mainstream media. The backlash intensified after Farrakhan discussed reparations for slavery, drawing parallels between compensation for Black Americans and that paid to Holocaust survivors and Japanese Americans interned during World War II. While the comments were rooted in historical context, critics seized on them as proof that the program had crossed a line, overshadowing the deeper political and ethical discussions taking place. Yet years later, Arsenio Hall revealed a stunning truth. He had submitted his resignation letter to Paramount executive Carrie McCluggage months before the Farrakhan interview ever aired. This revelation dismantled the long-held myth that the show's cancellation was caused solely by the controversy. In reality, the decision stemmed from multiple factors: declining ratings, shifting audience demographics, and changes within the television industry that made syndicated programs harder to sustain. Arsenio, ever the professional, continued producing high-quality episodes even after deciding to leave, determined to give his staff and audience a strong finish. Knowing his time on air was limited, the Farrakhan interview was not a desperate ratings ploy but an active journalistic final statement about the importance of confronting difficult conversations and amplifying marginalized voices, even at personal cost. The controversy, however, gave Paramount the convenient cover it needed to frame the cancellation as a business decision rather than censorship. The truth was far more complex. By 1993, the Arsenio Hall show was already struggling against rising competition, including Fox's ill-fated Chevy Chase show, which siphoned away key affiliates and damaged ratings despite lasting only 5 weeks. Economic pressures mounted as media consolidation reshaped the industry. Paramount's merger with Viacom shifted corporate priorities, making Arsenio's independently spirited show less appealing to executives chasing safer profits. The program also faced criticism from LGBTQ+ activists who argued that it failed to include enough queer representation, further adding to the perception that it had become too controversial and unpredictable for advertisers. When the Arsenio Hall show aired its final episode, on May 27, 1994, just 3 months after the Farrakhan interview, it marked the end of a transformative chapter in late-night television. The show's demise was not the simple story of a host destroyed by one controversial guest, but a complex convergence of race, economics, and media politics. Arsenio Hall's courage to challenge fear and open the stage to unfiltered voices remains a landmark in American broadcasting, a reminder that true representation often comes with a cost, and that the price of progress in mainstream media has never been cheap.